Most people learn Java. On this channel, we build with it. Hi, I'm John, and welcome back to Java with John. Today I want us to go through something very interesting. Every time someone creates an Instagram account, they type a username into a box, just like so. And it's actually simple. But behind that box, before that username ever reaches Instagram's database, it has to pass through a validation pipeline. This is simply a series of checks and transformations that run in milliseconds. What I want us to do today is basically go through how that happens. In order for us to do that, we will have to go through 7 rules that Instagram actually follows. These are 7 rules that we're going to be enforcing within our code. Rule number 1, there is no leading or trailing white spaces. Rule number 2, the username must be all lowercase. Rule number 3, it must be between 3 and 30 characters. Rule number 4, it cannot contain spaces in the name. Rule number 5, it cannot start with a period or an underscore. Rule number 6, you cannot use the word Instagram in the name. Rule number 7, we replace the double underscores with a single one. Simply put, we just sanitize. Finally, we're going to be displaying a cleaned preview of what the handle will look like, and that is the very last step that we're going to be looking at. Without much further ado, let us begin. Now, imagine this. You come in and you just type your username. Let me just call it raw. So in this username, it's messy. So John Doe 99, just something like that. So this is what a typical user is going to type. Users are sloppy. They can add spaces, they use capitals. Our first job is to clean the input before we even start validating it. So here's where the trim method comes in. So we're going to create another variable. I'll just call it username. Then in this variable, we're going to assign our initial string, which is what the username was, and then we're going to be invoking the trim method. Remember, the trick with trim here is that we're going to be getting rid of the leading and the trailing white spaces. That is number 1. Number 2, we also enforce the rule that the username must contain lowercase characters. All of them have to be lowercase. So for that, we can simply take the same variable we created, and then to it we assign that same variable, which is username, calling the method to lowercase right there. So we can have a look at it in a print line statement. Just a moment. So I'll just output the username there. So we'll just run it. One moment. Okay, let me just run it from up top there. So we're going to run it, and then we'll see what this is going to give us. There it is. So initially we had a space just before the J, a space after the 9. Initially also the J and the D were capital, and we have been able to get rid of those two. So first thing is we call trim before anything else, because if we check the length before trimming, spaces would count as characters, and that is tricky. So a user who types 5 spaces would pass the length check, but they would fail for the wrong reason. Always clean before you validate. The other rule that I want us to enforce is, I'll just disable this, we're going to enable it after every rule that we add. The other rule that I want us to enforce is to check the length, either too short or too long. Now, Instagram by default requires a username to be at least 1 character and not more than 30 characters. So to keep things interesting on our end, we are just going to give it a minimum of 3, which is also more realistic. So we can create a variable. I can just call it len, and in this we're going to take username, and then we're going to invoke the length function there. Now the length function is not to be confused with what we normally call for arrays. So a beginner might make a classic mistake at this point. They write username.length but exclude the parentheses. This is what would typically happen for an array, but strings are objects, they are not arrays. So objects have methods, and methods need the parentheses. So this trips up every beginner exactly once, but after you get used to it, you're good to go. So we can go through the validation here. So if the length is less than 3, that's the first thing. Sorry, if the length is less than 3, at this point we can just display something. So toShort minimum of 3 characters. Else if, another validation that we can add at this point here, the length is greater than 30, because we are not supposed to go above 30. So if the length is greater than 30, we can as well display something here, too long, maximum of 30 characters allowed. Else, so meaning it doesn't fall under the category of those two, at this point is where now we can maybe say the length is okay. So length okay, then probably we could let's see, we could maybe display the length, the actual length. So I just want to append that variable there, then characters, then we close that parenthesis. So at this point we actually don't even need anything else. We can just run it as it is and see the output. So length okay, 10 characters. There's no need to count, it's actually okay. Now step number 3, rule number 3, or step number 3 anyway. There are no spaces allowed inside the username. So for that, okay, we should actually just be labeling this. So step 1, sorry, this was supposed to be a comment. Step 1, remove leading and trailing white spaces. Then in the same step, change every character to lowercase. So this was our step 2, where we said we are simply check the length should be between 3 to 30 characters. So that now we move to step number 3. Step 3. So in step 3, no spaces allowed in the username, not leading and trailing, but in the actual username. So after trimming, there should be 0 spaces anywhere in the username, and this is quite simple because we simply invoke the contains function that checks for internal spacing. So if we are still operating with the same variable that we called username up here, so if username and then we invoke the contains function, and then inside the contains function, the parameter that we're going to append is actually a space inside the quotation marks. So if the name contains a space, then we simply come and display something. So username cannot contain spaces. Username cannot contain spaces. Otherwise, assuming the username is okay, we can display something here. So maybe we could say no spaces, then just simple message. Now, going back, in step 1 we had already called or invoked trim. So leading and trailing white spaces are gone. But what if someone came in and typed John Doe with a space in between? Trim does not touch that, and that is why we still need the contains function. The methods all work together and each one does one specific job. Let's move on. In step 4, we get rid of the @ symbol, the one that is typically used for usernames. So the @ symbol not allowed in the username. What normally happens is that Instagram is the one that takes care of adding the @. So it's reserved for tagging users on Instagram. So if someone tries to put it in their username, we're actually going to reject it. And in order for us to do that, we have to invoke a method called indexOf. So it works perfectly here. So it tells us exactly where a character appears, or we can indexOf returns an integer actually. So let's see how we work with that. Let me see. I must have skipped something. So in step 1 we checked the length, and then we changed or converted to lowercase. In step 2 we checked whether the length is okay. In step 3 we are getting rid of the spaces in the username. Yes, so in step 4, yes, this is what I skipped. Before we get to this, usernames, I'm actually trying to follow along here. We have dealt with this, so we are supposed to move on to this one here. So we've in step 1 and 2 I combined them as one, then this was step 2, this was step 3, now we're in step 4 at this point here. So we cannot start with a period or an underscore. So that is step 4, cannot start with a period or underscore. There. Now, Instagram does not allow handles to begin with a period or a dot or a full stop. Also, it does not allow underscores because it looks broken in the user interface. So we need to check specifically the first character. And for us to do that, we can invoke, or we will invoke, the charAt function. So charAt is basically supposed to return a character. So we can create a variable, maybe I can call this first char, char, I can only spell char, yes. Then we take the same variable, username, and then, username, and then we invoke the charAt function. And it's quite simple because we're looking at the first character, which is supposed to be 0. Now, charAt and whichever character or whichever index, that you're going to pass is supposed to return the character at that position. So index 0 means the first character, index 1 means the second character, and so on and so forth. So we want to check for a period or an underscore. So at this point, we also have some validation to do, basically. So if first char is either a dot, or I'll explain this in a moment, first char is an underscore there, we basically display something to the user, and we say cannot start with a period or an underscore. Okay, I forgot the quotation marks, do apologize for that. So cannot start with a period or an underscore. Otherwise, if it does not contain those characters, then we are good to go. So this, we can simply display a message, starting character. Okay, so we are golden up to that point. Now, two things to point out here. First is the charAt function. It returns a character. So basically it returns a primitive and not a string. That is the reason why when we are doing the comparison here, we are using the two equal symbols with the single quotes and not the equals function that is typically used with strings, and equals normally goes with double quotes. Secondly, the index here, 0, means the very first character. So strings in Java are zero indexed, exactly like how arrays work. And we've dealt with arrays in the past, so I do believe that you know what I am talking about. That was step 4. Now in step 5, we go back to our original discussion. We get rid of the @ symbol, so it's not allowed. That one is left entirely on Instagram. So we can create a variable, an integer, then we can call this @position. Then we're going to assign to it username, which is our original variable, calling the indexOf method. Now indexOf, we're going to pass to it a string, pair of quotation marks, double quotation marks. Now indexOf returns the index of the first occurrence of that particular character that we've passed to it, or that particular string. It is designed to return -1 if the character is not found, and this is the key. So if @position, which is our integer up there, our variable, is not equal to -1, which actually means that our character, our @ has been found. So we, sorry, slight mistake there. So we come in a print line. So start with a message, username cannot contain the @ there. So username, then another message, where did we find it? So found @ position. Then probably we can just display that particular index or position where it was found. So this is supposed to be a plus, sorry, plus. So it was found at that particular position. Now if the @ does not appear, it means we are okay. So in this we can print out no @ symbol. So our input is okay up to that point. Now currently the username that we had initially started with does not contain the @, so we expect it will pass step 5 here. So if we run it, let's see what we get. So length is okay, those are 11 characters, and 11 is including the space we added. Username cannot contain spaces. That was the error we actually got from this part here because there was a space in between the string, then starting character is okay and no @ symbol found, so it's still okay up to that point. Now, something to point out here. When we talk about -1, that return value is a convention that you will see throughout Java and programming in general. So it means not found. So indexOf doesn't return null, it doesn't throw an error, it just returns -1. So your check is always, if the result is not -1, the thing exists. So please burn that into your memory. Now, next, the strict rule here, you cannot use the word Instagram in the name. Very important. So for us to actualize that, so that is step 6. Let me just call it step 6. So username cannot contain Instagram. It's reserved. You can't do that. So Instagram always protects its own brand. Now username can contain or can include the word Instagram in any form, uppercase, lowercase, or mixed. And this is where the contains and toLowerCase work as a team. So first thing, we actually just dive right into the validation with this one. If username, first thing we do, we had already lowercased it in step 1, but showing the pattern explicitly. So toLowerCase, we invoke it first, then after it has been converted to lowercase, we go ahead and invoke the contains function, and in this we actually pass our string and we are looking for Instagram within the name. So if it is found, if Instagram is found, so username cannot contain the word Instagram, but if Instagram doesn't exist in the username, then this particular person is all good. So no brand name conflicts, so this is okay. Now what we've just done in this if right here is a feature that we call method chaining, and this is where it starts to get elegant. Instead of creating a new variable to hold the lowercase version, we simply call the toLowerCase function, and immediately we call the contains on the result. One line, two methods. This is how real Java code reads, and it's worth slowing down and pointing out at each method so that you can be able to follow the chain. So I hope up to that point we are okay. If there is any question, please don't hesitate to post it in the comments. Moving on. Step number 7. In step 7, we sanitize the double underscores. The point here was users can make a mistake. We are only human. So you can either knowingly or unknowingly add 2 underscores. Now, some platforms quietly clean up your username as you type. So if a user enters a double underscore, which looks messy and is likely a typing mistake, we replace it silently with a single one rather than rejecting them outright. So that is where the replace function comes in. So let's start with a variable. Now at this point, we're actually going to introduce a new variable. So you can call this sanitized. So we take our original variable, which was username, and then we invoke the replace function, replace normally takes two characters. So the very first character is the old, or what is there, and right now we are talking about the double underscores. Second character, what are you replacing it with? And that is a single underscore there. Then if, let's just be thorough about this, if sanitized dot equals, yes, there, and then I actually want to use username at this point, but I actually want to negate this by adding an exclamation mark at the beginning. If there is any sanitization that is needed at this point, meaning we found the double underscores and we would like to replace them automatically. So let's add a print line. So double underscores replaced automatically there. Then we can print out the username, the new username. So new username, then we can display that. Then finally reassign the new username to our original variable, and our original variable was username, so we reassign with a new value which is sanitized there. So if there was no double underscores, then there is no work for us to do. So no sanitization needed, so meaning this is okay, like currently how we have it. Now strings are immutable. That means replace as a function does not change the original string. It simply creates a brand new one and returns it. So if you don't assign the result to a variable, the change disappears. And that is why when we write, if I was to give this here, if we were to write that, we are overwriting the variable and not the string object. Very important to mention that. So that is step 7. We can actually run it because we know no sanitization was needed at this point. But assuming for some reason this user typed with a double underscore, then it's going to go through the validation of sanitization, and then it's going to give the new username, just like that. Okay, now in step 8, we have one more step after this. So compare with a reserved username. So some usernames are reserved, so the likes of admin, support, help, etc., etc. And this is where we are going to learn an important rule about Java string comparisons. So we never use the double or the equals when it comes to comparing strings. So let's start with an array actually of the reserved keywords. So they are not that many, so we can just type this in a single line. We have admin, that is number 1. We have support. These are names that you can't use as your handle. We have help. We can actually throw in Instagram to this list. Then we can also add official there. Now official, sorry, this is a typo right there. Let's create a variable. When we were talking about variables, we talked about boolean. Boolean is a variable, or sorry, boolean is a data type that supports true or false. Now let's actually use a for each loop. It's cleaner in this case. In a for each loop, we start by declaring a variable that is the same type as our array type. We separate with a full colon. On the other end of it, we simply pass we simply pass our array variable on the other end. Now in the loop, because we are looking at the words one by one, this is where we actually do comparison. And when we are comparing two strings, as opposed to how we do it with characters and integers, there's actually a function for that. So username, we invoke the equals function, and then in equals, this is where we pass word, which represents every single character in our array. So if whatever this user typed is found within these names that we have listed there, we take our variable, our boolean, and then we reassign a new value, which is true, and we stop execution of the loop at that point. So let's do another validation down here, away from the loop now. If is reserved. Remember, this is supposed to return true or false. So if it returns true, then it means that this or this username is reserved. We can't use it. Otherwise, the username actually is okay. So not reserved. Okay. So time for testing this. So this is okay. It's actually working as expected. So step 9, final step. In step 9, we display the final formatted handle, Instagram handle of this person. So let's start with a string. I think I can just call it handle, and then in this we're going to concatenate two things, the @ and then the username. We just want to display that. So from there we can let me enable this. Okay, I'm missing a semicolon there, sorry. So I'll change something in the last print line there. So username accepted, and we are assuming we've gone through everything, and we are also assuming everything checks out. So your handle then we concatenate the handle at the end there. Having gotten to that point, I do believe we are okay. What our program was designed to do is quite simple. The moment we got to this, the expectation from the user's point of view is that they're going to be prompted to actually retype the username again. So the program works fine. We get to the end of the Instagram username validator. So we are not just learning Java, we are actually building with it. Thank you for taking your time to watch the video. Do post any questions, any comments that you might have. Until we meet next time.